Hello everyone, what's up? In today's video I'll show you how to quickly and easily dry brush your models using metallic oil paints. Yes, you heard correctly. Metallic oil paints are a thing, and they're a pleasure to dry brush. In fact, this method is so quick and easy that it was my 7-year-old son who did most of the dry brushing, as you will see. But let's get started, shall we? Same as with my recent Dwarf Spider Droid, or DSD if you prefer, I went with Tamiya LP1 as the foundation for our metallics. This is a gloss black lacquer paint, and even though it's not really a primer, the fact that it's a lacquer makes it totally dependable in this role. As usual with other Tamiya paints, I thinned it around 50% with lacquer thinner, and I sprayed it at a pressure of around 20 psi. As you can see, I went with a very thin initial mist, gradually increasing the opacity. This is not really necessary, strictly speaking, but it will improve the adherence of the paint even further. The end result was a bunch of very glossy black droids. Okay, on to the main event now. So, what are we doing today? We're painting what?
B2 Super Battle Droids.
And what painting technique are we using?
Drybrush.
Okay, let's tell our viewers what paints we're using. We're using this paint, right?
Oilbrusher gunmetal.
Thank you. Let's try. So, as my son has explained, these are the Oilbrushers by AMMO Oilbrushers, which we'll be using. Unlike artists' oils, they have a very low amount of linseed oil, and they're already pre-thinned. Therefore, all we need to do is to shake the paint vigorously, apply some to our palette, no need for cardboard or whatever, by the way, and then get some on our brush. Same as with any other kind of dry brushing, we will unload most of the paint onto some kitchen paper or tissue. So here you can see how my son started to paint his first droid. He was careful to apply very little pressure and to apply the paint in only one direction, downwards that is. Even though our footage isn't the best, I'm afraid, I'm sure that you can tell that this was working very well. The gel-like consistency of the paint makes it spread effortlessly over the surface of the model, while at the same time, coverage is truly amazing. With his second droid, the little guy was already gaining confidence and speed. With his increased enthusiasm, I was struggling to keep the action inside the frame, but I think the results speak for themselves. Check that out. So we were both very excited at this stage. I mentioned coverage before. As you can see, just a few light downward strokes get you complete opacity. Better yet, the dusty, chalky finish that you always get when dry brushing acrylics is nowhere to be seen. Now it was time for some highlights with the aluminum oil brusher. After shaking the paint thoroughly, I loaded a smaller brush with it and got ready to do some dry brushing of my own. My first target was the head and the torso of the model, where I also applied some stippling in order to create some more texture and visual interest. Then I went with raised edges in areas which I wanted to emphasize. The entire highlighting process for one miniature took me less than 1 minute, and both my son and I were happy with the results. So here are the finished droids, with some weathering, their red lenses, and their bases done. Painting one from grey plastic until we finished dry brushing took under 5 minutes per model. All I really did after dry brushing was to varnish them, to seal in the oil paints, apply a wash, dry brush just the edges of details and panels again, pick out the red lenses, and that was that. I must say that I'm very pleased with the results, but the biggest win was in the process itself. By dry brushing, instead of using my beloved AK Extreme Metals for the airbrush, my son could do some of the painting with me, which is a big plus for us as a family. And well, I will admit that for me as a painter, it was also a welcome change to be able to paint something without wearing a mask. Now, what about the finish? Can the results compare with those that you get with pro-level metallic paints, like Ironclad or AK Extreme Metals? You tell me. Here you can see a side-by-side comparison. The droids from my previous B2 video are definitely shinier, and I would say that overall they have a more realistic metal finish. However, the dry brushed ones are really good enough for me, and having another option in my quiver is always a good thing. Besides, there is always an element of taste. Which ones do you prefer? Let me know in the comments. In the meantime, let me show you another good reason to try these metallic oil paints. All the metallic parts on these two Star Wars Legion vehicles were painted with the same method. That is to say, they're brushing the paint from the oil brushers. Now the thing is, neither of these models are designed with sub-assemblies in mind. Unlike with, say, Bandai Star Wars models, with these you're meant to really put them together and then paint them up. Therefore, using the dry brushed oils allowed me to get a really good finish with a minimum of fuss. The alternative would have been to carefully mask off the rest of the vehicle, which in both cases would have been really time consuming given the shapes involved. And by the way, before anyone runs to tell me in the comments that they love the AK True Metal range and that those are so much better, yeah, sorry, but I beg to differ. As you can see, I own several of those, and yes, I have used them quite a bit. To begin with, I painted the entire trim on this Warhound Titan with them, so yes, I know what I'm talking about. These AK wax-based paints have several important drawbacks in my experience. First of all, they are far too thick unless you thin them. With the oil brushers, it's just plug and play. The AK ones are quite hard to get to the right consistency. They also dry on your brush all the time, and they are much harder to remove once you make a mistake. With the oils, just a little thinner, and away you go. As for the finish, yes, I would rate the finish with the AK True Metals as above the oil brushers in terms of realism, but not enough so to compensate for these drawbacks in terms of ease of use. So, in conclusion, if you want an easy, quick way to get a convincing metallic finish on either a complete model or maybe some parts of it, try dry brushing with the oil brushers. Now, this video has been a bit of an oddity for me. I pride myself on the conciseness of my content, and this one had far more rambling than usual. But I really enjoyed making it, and I hope that you have enjoyed watching it as well. Stay tuned for more hobby content at the Race for Terra. As always, I would like to thank all of my Patreon supporters. Your generosity helps me keep the lights on, and it is very much appreciated. Thank you all, and remember, keep it up and weather it out.